and welcome to another episode of Cosmic Chats. Today we have an individual who's going to talk to us about dealing with epilepsy since childhood. She is a comedian and writer in the Los Angeles area. Welcome, Jazzy Byner.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So hold on, you're going to find out how she coped with epilepsy and 5 tips at the end of what you can do that she has learned through her challenges. And let's get into a fun first question, which is, how would you describe the taste of a banana to someone who's never had one?
Okay, I would tell them that this is a very controversial fruit. I feel it is. I feel deeply about the banana. So I don't think that the banana is something that people just casually like. Like there's so many people I know where if there's a banana in a smoothie, they feel good or they feel bad about it. They don't want it. Because I think the banana is a really strong flavor once the sugar starts to set in. So I would explain to the person, I would say if you saw like a green or a super yellow banana, you're going to get something light fruity, kind of starchy, kind of leaves like a film on your tongue, but soft. And then I think I'd be like, if you see any bruises on it, it's going to start to like smell and taste like sugary rum cake.
So either you're going to feel like your tongue is coated as if you've been up all night, or you have a hangover from drinking too much rum.
Right. Actually, yeah. The same things happen in my mouth. And it's oddly like the chalky, the chalky hangover, or no, the chalky dry mouth. I like the green and the yellow banana way more than I like the brown. I have a whole freezer full of black bananas, and I've perfected banana bread just because I once the brown starts to set in, I can't. I was eating a banana on the way to work on the freeway once and almost like threw up out of the window on the 405 because I like hit like a big brown sugary. It's so weird.
And for those of you who don't know, the 405 is one of the most jammed freeways in Los Angeles in rush hour traffic.
You're not going anywhere on the way to work. Okay, I'm gonna go so LA on this. On the way to work from the Valley to West LA, around that Sepulveda Pass, I'm like, there's nothing. You know what? I have to tell everybody, I mind over mattered it. I survived. I'm here. I am woman. Hear me roar. I'm
mind
okay, but
over matter. Yes. And that was the matter. Moving on, let's find out about your perception changes in life. So we lead this in with how and when did you have your first existential life crisis as a child?
As a child, I mean, I feel like they started so young. I grew up epileptic, so I had seizures from the age of 5 to 11. And so having my first seizure at 5, I think was a really big thing in understanding that I don't always have control over my body. And not just control over my body, but control over my presence in some sort of sense, because it was pretty intense. It would be like at least once a month, if not twice a month, between the ages of 5 and 11. And a lot of medication. I did going to the nurse's office 2 times a day because at some point I was on like Tegretol 3.5 times a day, like 3.5 pills.
So
as a
is
kid.
that for those people who don't know, that prescription, is it a heavy drug for a child to take?
I would think it is because they also prescribe it to adults. So any of the medication I remember taking, like after I was on Tegretol most of my childhood, and they realized that was what slowed my metabolism, and that's when I started gaining weight. Was when they would up my dosage, and so it really did, having epilepsy shape my whole childhood. It shaped what my mom would be afraid if for me to do certain things, like if there were any flashing lights, haunted houses, stuff like that. I mean, not that haunted houses like a weird scene anyway, right? So I probably was saved from something. But because as a teenager, when you start to venture out, I'm not saying I've never done a haunted house, but yeah, as a child. So I think as a child, existentially, I knew I was different from the other kids in my class, and the other kids in my class knew I was different because sometimes I'd be playing handball and I'd just fall to the ground and flop around for a while. So it was, I think, a very early stage into to realizing that place in a social structures.
When you had your first epilepsy, is it called episode? Is that correct to say?
A seizure episode, I think, would be okay to say.
Do you remember it? And how old were you?
Was 5, and I was at this time I was living in a trailer park in the valley, and I remember, so I remember the sliding glass door being open, the screen being shut, and looking out at the street and a motorcycle driving past. And the loud noise, I remember, really jarring me. And then I remember, and whenever I had a seizure, I would have a very distinct, and somebody told me recently that this has a name, but I had like a really distinct series of things that would happen. So like I would all of a sudden, everything would go black, like my eyes would be open, but I couldn't see anything. And then colors would start shooting in my vision. And that would be like, now that I could tie all these things together, that would be the moment. And the same for my first seizure, when my body's on the floor and I'm starting to seize. So the black is like the when it starts, then my body drops, lights, and then it goes in reverse. Then it's like black again, lights, and then I could see again. And that would last anywhere between a minute and a half to 3 minutes, I think.
So your first one happened, was it at school?
It was at home. So I was at home at the trailer, and just a motorcycle went past. And my mom was there, and she was actually a nurse that did EEGs, which measures the brain waves at the time, and that sort of stuff. And so she was familiar with it, but she had said my whole childhood, like that was still, it was jarring to have it be me versus a patient that she was helping. And it actually kind of deterred her from the field because she felt after that point she couldn't separate her panic anymore. So but that, that's a whole other but so yeah, it was at home. We went to the hospital, they diagnosed, and the first medication they gave me I was allergic to. So then
Which one was that?
That was a phenobarbital. I like blew up and had a rash. And I remember just kind of being really uncomfortable and staying home from school for that. Then there would be a lot of sort of like, oh, I had a seizure, so then I had a concussion, and like time off of school as well. But yeah, it was. I would probably put that as first conscious, as first conscious awareness.
That's quite dramatic. So you had that at home, you had 2 awakenings, something was different with you, and then you perceived how your mother was viewing her viewpoint of herself as a result of her child having this condition. So I want to first of all keep continuing in. So this happened when you were 5, you were taking this medication, and then did something happen at school that then became this education that Jazzy is different? Or was there no education and an episode happened?
No education episode happened. To put us in times, so I'm 38. So we're talking, this was probably started in 1988, that I had my first seizure. So we're talking kindergarten, that age. I don't remember having any in school during the kindergarten age. I do recall starting in first grade though. And it was not something that I recall that it was a class made aware of in a formal sense, but I had a best friend that I made in kindergarten who has always been a very outspoken, she was an outspoken little gal and grew up into an outspoken mother and woman. And she comes from a long line of them. And I was lucky enough to be close to that family. And that family was educated because I would do sleepovers and stuff. So she was kind of my protector on schoolyard stuff. So she knew what to do, and she was the responsible, she like took a pride, in caring for me, which I've always been appreciative of. And so she would kind of tell people in my memory of it. And, if kids had problems with it, I'm sure that was addressed, but it wasn't something that was, it wasn't something that was made fun of more than me being the fat kid. So it wasn't anything like that, but it was a sense of difference for me because, think about like falling when you're a kid and how embarrassing that is. You're like, oh man. And I would regularly do it in an unconscious and then have to be taken to the nurse's office. And then my mom called, and then I'd have to be kept awake all night. So to make sure it's not a concussion and that something bad doesn't happen. I mean, I've had to have had so many concussions just based on places where I've fallen.
So when they were happening frequently, you were on a medication. Was it propelled by stress?
So I'm going to fast forward to kind of answer this question with the knowledge I have now versus the knowledge that when I was going through it that I had. When I was 35, I started therapy and I was diagnosed on the spectrum, autistic spectrum disorder. I had suspected it after listening to a book about the disorder. I was listening to it out of curiosity for myself, for family members that have children on the spectrum, and just understanding, because there's so much weird information. At the time, I even thought there's just so much weird information, and I don't have a grasp. So I was listening to it, and it was like, well, kids on the spectrum have this, they do this, and I was like, all of this makes sense to me. I don't know why they think this is weird, like all the bullet points it was hitting. And then they said, and it's although epileptic disorders usually come on in second after puberty, which was something that they would discuss a lot when I was a kid, that it was different for me to get it when I was 5. Not unheard of, but not as common, was the way that they would talk about me a lot. and so I guess that's also weird for a kid too, right? Like there's always like adults standing around going, "Hush, I don't know." Like it was always like looking at a chart and being like, she's weird. So not unheard of, but not very common. And that I got it when I was a kid. And fast forward listening to this book, they said it's common for kids on the spectrum to have seizures and even grow out of it alongside puberty. And that was like a light bulb for me in that moment. So when my therapist started working with me, I had mentioned that to him, and we did some testing, and he was like, if for him, he was like, this is the puzzle piece that I've been looking for. This makes so much sense. And after that, he started treating me as his other spectrum patients. And now that's been 3 years. My whole life has changed, and it's amazing. And I understand so much more about what happened in my childhood.
Were you still having seizures before you were going to therapy?
I always knock on wood. I had my last seizure when I was 11, which was also around when I got my period.
Okay, so they were correct with that. In puberty, it shifted for you.
Yeah, so in puberty, it shifted for me. And I always knock on wood because I feel like if it's something my body did before, it's something my body's capable of. I have what I call seizure activity occasionally if I'm under a lot of stress. I will sometimes, like anybody, get insomnia, or even along with my PMS, I get insomnia, also common. But if I don't sleep for a good stretch of days, if I go 24, 48, and, because got to go to work, um, I will start to, my executive dysfunctions shut down really easily. My cognitive functions shut down really easily, start to lose words. And worst case scenario, I have something that will happen, but I'm very careful about taking care of now as an adult, which is not getting to this point, which is I'll wake up where I'm stuck in my body. I can mentally think, but I can't control myself physically. And that's a point of exhaustion that can happen to me, where I will, when I wake up, my eyes will be kind of fluttering, seizure activity wise. I can't talk, but I can think. I know what's happening the whole time. And the only thing that helps is sleeping. So I just try not to let myself get to that point if I can.
It's deep rest for the body, right?
Yeah.
And although this is not a cure, many people who we've taught meditation to, when they're getting deep rest, and the meditation we teach gives 2 to 5 times more deep rest in 20 minutes than lying down for 8 hours, and that the body has more ability to adapt, right? And so if there is additional stress and lack of sleep and lack of rest for the physiology, which in modern day society is one area which we think is negotiable, but it's not for the body.
No,
right?
It tells me.
We think, oh, just work through it. Come on, you're a trooper. Coming from England, pull up your bootstraps. This cannot be played with. So this is where tools such as meditation can help to allow the system to be able to get some deep rest regularly, right? And start to shift from fight or flight mode, which can help the body be less stressed. So if we are in the effect of more stress, i.e. not enough sleep, it's going to put you in a precarious position. So I want to backtrack a little bit to go over how you coped up to 11 years old with your perception of being different, because there are people who may be feeling helpless with their children about this. So you felt different. You were known as this person. There always had to be exceptions. Did you have limited capacity to hang out with people because they'd go to events that could possibly trigger a seizure?
No, I think it was, as far as that was concerned, I was allowed, I had a lot of freedoms. I was allowed to do a lot of things. Just, it was, if you can go to the carnival, but if you go to the carnival, don't do X, Y, and Z, don't do the House of Mirrors, so, and it's not to say that I wouldn't do this stuff. Sometimes it'd be like that. I don't want to tell these friends, so I'm going to just close my eyes and, do those things. But I would say that because I don't know, like, I feel like with kids, you settle in, you're like, this is life. This is what's been presented to me. This is what's on a silver platter. And I definitely had a knowledge that I wasn't happy with things. I could look back and my depression, now that I know what my depression is, my depression started probably when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And so there's all those things where I could say I knew I was different. I knew I was unhappy, but I still kind of didn't think that I was less than in some ways. Like I always kind of just walked around going, no, I'm here. Let's play handball. Let's do this. Like I still just kind of adapted. I've always kind of had an adaptability and a resilience where I'm not maybe I'm not pulling it off great, but I'm going to try to pull it off.
Did you find that people treated you differently?
Adults did. Some adults would be very cautious and would want me to, like certain older family members would keep me in the house while other kids were playing, and want to feed me every time they gave me a pill, because that's something that you're trained to do. But I would get like a big old meal every 3 times a day, in addition to, and you had to sit down and feed, and I think that that's like one of the introductions for kids of in a way, right? Is having a ritualistic way that a meal is given to you. And I think that there was a lot of ways in which the adults ritualistically around me ritualistically fed me as a part of my condition as well. Not to say that kids don't like junk food or or any of that stuff. I think that all of how you grow up plays into your diet, and then what you end up doing with it, and what sort of disordered eating you get in our country.
Absolutely. So base fundamentals were here: sleep, regular meals with food, not food-like meals, like food.
Right.
And going outside. But basic elements that somehow have got lost over time, that are now having to be made a priority. I must remember to sleep. I must remember to, I don't know, sit down and have a meal. Right, sit down and have a discussion and a meal. I put the devices down. In some ways, you are being of service of reminding people that these are fundamentals we can't have shortcuts with. Yeah. So you're with a kid that had to sit down and have a regular meal. This is the same if you have children who have blood sugar issues, that it's bringing it back to how we have to take care of ourselves. So you were considered that the adults they wanted to make sure nothing happened on your watch, because they would not know how to cope with it. What about sleepovers? Were they limited?
No, well, because I would go to the same people's houses all the time. So their families knew how to deal with it if it happened. I can't remember a lot of sleepover situations where a seizure would happen. Off the top of my head, doesn't mean it didn't, because that was many years ago when there were many seizures had. I think that I probably really only remember the traumatic ones, like the ones on the schoolyard where everybody's looking. I think is my big memories. But I'm sure that there were other ones. I realize more now how it made my routines different than they could have been. At the time, I think that's what I mean by being adaptable or resilient, is like, I think at the time I didn't realize that I could have had a different sort of childhood. I just knew I was different, but I didn't understand how those tools at play were shaping exactly what you say, like my relationships with eating regularly, or eating enough, or eating real food versus junk food versus, and watching my sleep the way that I do. It's interesting. A lot of the research that goes along with epilepsy talks about, and with autism spectrum disorder, that low carb diets are really great to help control your brain activity, because you're introducing less sugar into your body. I think is part of the science. Again, I read articles online. Who knows what sort of lies I'm telling you right now? But my understanding
we're here
to
find out your personal experience. That's what's interesting to pass on to others. So let's backtrack a little bit in regards to your awakening or perception shift of your mother and seeing this seizure happen when you were younger. So she moved out of the profession that she was in, is that correct? And as a result, how did you feel about yourself with her change as a result of being epileptic?
Well, I was parentalized in a lot of different ways. My mother is at least a 20 plus year meth addict at this point. And I would say so that started in my early teens. So I'm not gonna, she was, I'm not gonna say that she was absentee completely. She was the main parent that me and my siblings had. Uh, like I wasn't raised by wolves, but I knew where they were. You know what I'm saying? So when I was 5, I was babysitting my newborn sister, and we had a teenager, young 20-year-old, in the neighbor in the trailer park who would come watch us while my mom went to work or go out after work and hang out. My stepdad was a drunk heroin addict, physically abusive. So it was a very chaotic, unstable situation. And I think that there were a lot of things that shaped my view of how responsible I am for things that happen around me. And one of those ways where drug addiction is not narcissism. However, when applied in raising a child, and sometimes specifically the mother to daughter relationship, I think that there was a lot of that sort of idealistic parenting and parentalization in the way of what I would be responsible for, what it would be my fault for happening. I stopped doing this because of you guys. I stopped doing this. I can't do this because of you.
So what things did you
that.
quit? What things did you quit as a result?
I don't see, they would want to put me into after school projects and stuff like that because they thought it would be a way to get me to not be fat. But it was never anything that I had like interest in. So I remember jumping from, and when I say they, is because at the time my mom was not as drug addicted. So there was a larger extended family around us at the time. So once we get to my brother, who's 8 years younger than me, there's a smaller extended family because isolation needs to occur in order for an addiction flame to burn. Uh, I think that my grandparents were also involved in this, wanting to get me active in things, and I just didn't have interest in it. I tried ballet, I tried gymnastics, I did cheerleading for a few years. I liked that. I took adult cooking classes at the YMCA when I was 8, just because they made me sign up for something, and I was like, I'll learn to make a scone with 40-year-old women. I don't like. I did brownies one year. I didn't like that. In hindsight, the having to get to somewhere at a time is really stressful for me. And I think it was always transition issues. Again, now that I have the diagnosis, I have the language. I have a lot of transition issues, and so the socializing with people who I'm not necessarily connecting with is really hard for me. So
But these were you had referred to, I wouldn't do this or I wouldn't do this. Are these those thises you're talking about?
Oh, I wouldn't do this or this. I don't know what I was saying. I was thinking of I mean, I don't think that, so here's what I think that I didn't do because of the way that my childhood was. As a teenager, I didn't want to experiment with like the hardcore drugs, like the acid or shroom. So I became the babysitter. So I became the group babysitter. Again, stoking the parentalization that was put into me young is I'm going to hang out with my friends. I want to be doing what they're doing, but I think that I would break my brain. And so I'm going to then just become responsible for their time.
Quite
And
also often with you are the eldest, is that correct?
yeah,
Quite
yeah.
often with the eldest child of parents that have addiction or the behavior of addiction, also narcissist parents as well, takes on the older responsible role. So, you know, fused in with that. Now, if you were to say five things to pass on to maybe a child that has uh, epilepsy, what would you pass on with wisdom to help them, knowing what you know now?
Sleep, 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 sleep. Number one, regulation. Low carb diet. I know a lot of people who have been able to maintain lives without medication by maintaining a strict low carb diet. Um, Make sure that the people close to you know about it. It's not shameful. I think that there is a certain amount of shame that kind of goes along with it because, like I said, you know, there's just that you are extra. You're messing with somebody's day when they see a kid fall on a playground. There's an adult that went home and drank some whiskey, I'm sure, after after that happened. So not to be ashamed, to educate, to talk openly about it, because destigmatization is the best way for it. That wallet business is not, keep your wallets out of people's mouths. Like
Oh, to bite down, you mean?
yeah, that's like one of those things where really, if somebody has a seizure in front of you, what you want to do is maybe just try to prevent the amount of damage they're doing to themselves. You don't want to like prone position, hug them or anything like that. Unless it's for whatever reason that the situation you're in, that's the safest thing to do. It's just like if you can put a pillow down, if it's like in a living room, you can put a pillow under their head, move stuff away from them. That's really the best you can do for somebody, is to make sure that they don't damage themselves.
So how do you prevent people swallowing their tongue?
Well, so when you put them, if you put them like on their back or like on their side, that's probably just not going to happen. If you put your hand in there, you're getting risked at getting bit. I mean, I know that I was lucky. I had petamol seizures. So I haven't
And for
had
those who
grand
don't
mal.
know what that is, can you describe that type of seizure?
So a petamol seizure is what they call like the lower class of seizures. So as long as that's what my diagnosis would say, if they came back, I would probably not be at risk of losing my license. But the grand mal seizures are the more intense. They are longer. They come out of nowhere. They come more often. So that's when people tend to lose their ability to drive. Also, if you get a seizure as an adult, like if I did have a seizure out of nowhere, I would probably lose my license, I think, for 6 months, because your doctor has to report that. Just to make, just while you're on your medication and seeing what's going on and making sure how to
And so we're going
care
to
for it.
put those additional resources in the description for people to get support that are needed. And you absolutely grew out of it at 11 years old with puberty, and have found later on now you are part on the spectrum and getting recovery from that. Jazzy is very prolific, female comedian. It hasn't stopped her from getting on stage with the lights and owning her truth of her story to share that with other people. We want to remind you, if you are looking into alternative health wellness such as meditation, Aware Meditation Inc. is a nonprofit, and we have an ebook that's completely free called Vedic Meditation Stories, where 100% of the stories are from people who've learned the practice. It's included individuals who were also addicted to a meth, who have recovered even people who have been down to the bottom and would never meditate and have gotten off of medication, including that for seizures, have changed their lives, has not been edited so that their voice can be heard. You can find that link there below for you. And if you want to help support that nonprofit, please just send a donation. Also, if you are in a community that is low income where you feel that no one is coming in to help with meditation, reach out to us, because we are looking to extend with our communities our large teachings. And with that, we want to thank Jazzy for being here with us, sharing her truth with her wonderful experiences and hopefully her little tips to help you, if you have loved ones who've been dealing with seizures as children, be able to have a little bit more wisdom to help you in your day. So thank you so much. And don't forget to like and subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. And we'll see you soon on the next Cosmic Chat.